recording right now until you're ready to start.
It's no, you
Just
unpaused
went
it.
unpaused it.
You unpaused it.
Oh, tech support.
I am going to start the recording now. So it should be recording, and I want to, I think should we just go ahead, panelists? Pretty good. Yeah, let's have it. I know people might be joining in still, and that's great. We want to welcome you to our workshop, Collaboration and Communication Utilizing ArcGIS Apps. For those who have joined us, please introduce yourself in the chat. If you just put your name and your organization, where you are, anything else, what you hope to get out of this session. And we'll just, after we have the panelists have brief introductions about their very interesting projects, then we will have an open session with you. So before I introduce the panelists, I'll introduce myself. I am Charmel Menzel, and I'm the moderator of the session. So in this role, I have the ability to I'm monitoring the chat and fielding questions for the panelists. And that all depends upon how many people we have join this session. If we keep it to a smaller number, then we might just go ahead and open up the mics or let you open up and ask the question. But as the panelists are going through and you feel like you might forget the question, or go ahead and just type it in and in the chat and we'll get back to it. Good, you're introducing yourself. Thanks. Before, well, as I was introducing myself, my day job is with Esri in Virginia, Vienna, Virginia, and I have lots of fun supporting organizations with collecting, analyzing, and sharing location-based data just to better inform decisions. And that's why I'm passionate about citizen science. I'm happy to be a part of this session because we're focusing on how best to relay that information to our volunteers, to our partners, to our financial supporters. And I mean, we have a lot of audience if you are in a citizen science world. You have volunteer recruitment and retention. We need to train volunteers, thank the volunteers, provide annual reports, and also share your scientific results and call the community to action. So that's why we formulated this session and asked these panelists to join us. We know you have many tools to use to collaborate, communicate on the internet. So we've narrowed down to these two applications, ArcGIS Hub and ArcGIS Story Maps. If you haven't heard of these are part of the ArcGIS Online system. And ArcGIS Hub is a place to collaborate and engage with your community. You provide them with the ability to organize around a community specific project. And you're going to hear about a great example today. And then ArcGIS Story Maps are about telling those stories, where you create that one story or a collection of stories around your project. And both of these applications, because we know most people are looking at their phones, so both of these applications are optimized to be used on a mobile device. So now I have the honor of introducing the panelists, and after I've asked each to do like a 10-minute session, and after we do this, we will just open up the floor for discussion. So panelists, I am going to ask, don't need to stay on the video. I'm going to start off with our first panelist, and I will stop sharing. And Karen, if you can share yours. And I'll introduce Abigail and Tim right before their session. So you guys, wonderful. So today our first panelist is Karen Klinger, and she is a GIS specialist at the Field Museum in Chicago, with a BS in wildlife biology and natural resources and an MS in geographic information systems. She has spent her career using GIS to support the management and conservation of natural and cultural resources. In addition to co-leading the Field Museum's Monarch Community Science Project, she co-developed a geospatial database system to store and track rights of ways, land that's managed for pollinator habitat. Pretty exciting. So over to you, Karen. Can't wait to hear about this.
Thank you, Sharmel. Hi, everyone. So today I will be talking about how we use ArcGIS Hub for Monarch Community Science. I am a GIS specialist at the Field Museum in Chicago. I work in the Keller Science Action Center, which strives to translate museum science into on-the-ground conservation action. As a GIS specialist, my focus is on collecting and visualizing data to improve our understanding of the world around us and make informed decisions. Today, I will be talking about why we study monarch butterflies, what we ask from our participating citizen scientists, and how we use Esri's ArcGIS Hub platform to effectively communicate and collaborate with our participants. Monarch butterflies are in trouble. The population east of the Rockies has declined over 80% in the last 2 decades, while the population in the west has declined to less than 0.1%. Because of these population declines, last December, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service found that monarch butterflies meet the criteria to be listed under the Endangered Species Act. However, due to the need to focus resources on higher priorities, they are currently only considered a candidate for listing. One of the primary causes of this population decline is the loss of milkweed habitat along the monarch's migration route. The population east of the Rockies spends each winter in central Mexico and then migrates northward during the spring and summer in search of milkweed to lay their eggs, going as far north as southern Canada. While adult monarch butterflies will drink nectar from a variety of blooming flowers, they will only lay their eggs on species of milkweed plants, which is the sole source of food for monarch caterpillars. In order to stabilize the eastern population, it is estimated that we need to plant approximately 1.8 billion stems of milkweed. About 5 years ago, the Field Museum began collaborating with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to understand how cities could contribute to this effort due to their location and dispersal along the monarch's migration path. Through our research, we found that urban areas, large and small, can contribute up to 1/3 of this estimated milkweed that is needed. And within cities, we found that residential areas have the potential to be a significant contributor of milkweed due to the high availability of plantable space or grass shrub habitat where milkweed can be grown. However, there's still a lot we don't know about how urban areas can support monarch butterflies. Because it would be impossible for us to go out and survey all of the milkweed in urban areas, we've turned to citizen scientists to tell us about the milkweed and monarchs that they see in their yards and community gardens. As we see here, milkweed gardens can come in all shapes and sizes, especially in the urban environment. And we want to learn more about what are the traits of a successful monarch milkweed garden. This will be our 3rd year conducting the Monarch Community Science Project in the Chicagoland region. With Esri's ArcGIS Hub, we created a website where people can go and learn everything that they need to know to participate in our project. And you can see our website at bit.ly/monarchmonitors. On our website, you can learn more about why we are doing this work. You can create a community account, register for our training sessions, access the surveys for data entry, view project resources to help you with collecting and entering your data, see live results as data is submitted, as well as read a summary of our results from our previous years. In order to participate, we ask people to create a community account by clicking on the star or sign up button located on our homepage. And this prompts them to create an account using GitHub, Facebook, Gmail, Apple, or other email address. And with these accounts, we can keep in contact with people and they can RSVP for our trainings and access those online surveys. With Esri's ArcGIS Hub, we can create events for our online or in-person training sessions and share them as part of a calendar or as featured events. Last year, we had over 400 people registered for our online training sessions. And because they are signed in with their community accounts, we can keep track of who and how many people have registered and email them with important information. We host these training sessions in May and June, so we have our next one starting next week. And during these training sessions, we teach people everything they need to know to participate in the project. And that includes how to identify monarch eggs, as well as the 5 stages of monarch caterpillars on their milkweed. And we also teach people how to enter their data through our online surveys. While we had in-person trainings during 2019, last year we were entirely virtual. And this year we plan to do a combination of virtual trainings as well as in-person opportunities to see caterpillars up close. When it's time to submit your data, we use two different surveys. The first survey shown on the left is the Site and Patches survey, and this is filled out only one time per site that you plan to monitor. And this is where you tell us about the location that you are monitoring, information about what's found in and around your site, as well as the number of milkweed patches that you are going to be monitoring. Then the second survey shown on the right is what you use to fill out your weekly observations. So you'll go out each week and you'll look at your milkweed plants and you'll count how many eggs as well as how many of the different stages of caterpillars you see. You can also record other observations, such as the other blooming flowers in your patch, as well as other insects and pollinators that you observe. These surveys are collected using Esri's Survey 123 platform, which is in the same family as Hub. Because you are signed in with your Hub community accounts, we can keep track of who entered what data without asking you to repeat the same information, identifying yourself every single time you enter your data. We've also automated the surveys so that once you submit a survey, a participant is emailed a summary of their data, so they have a record of what they entered. This email also includes customized links that they can use to enter their data the following week. These customized links will automatically fill in information such as the patch's name, the species of milkweed plants, and the number of milkweed plants that they have in their patch, so that they don't have to repeat the same information every single time they go to fill out their survey. Also on our website, participants can find a number of resources to help them with collecting and entering their data. They can download documents to help them define their site, identify different species of milkweed, as well as the 5 stages of caterpillar. And they can also download a paper sheet if they'd like to record on paper before entering their data online. We also have video clips from our training sessions if they need a course refresher. We also have a page dedicated to frequently asked questions where you can go and find answers to commonly asked questions. With Esri's ArcGIS Hub platform, the entire site is multilingual. By clicking on a button on the left-hand side, you can translate the whole website into any desired language. We've also dedicated this project to expanding our reach into Spanish. So we have a full page that's dedicated to all of our resources, including our downloadable documents and our training sessions in Spanish. And also, when you go to enter your data into our surveys, you can choose to have the entire surveys translated into Spanish. On our results page, you can see live results as data is submitted because our surveys are integrated with the Hub platform. We, of course, don't have any data yet as we're just getting into the season, but you can see some examples of our data from last year's collection. So as throughout the summer, we could see the number of sites and patches that people were recording, as well as how many times people were going out to visit. We can also watch as the number of eggs, caterpillars, and adult monarchs increase throughout the summer. Also on our results page, we've shared a map of where the sites are located based on that first survey that people entered. In that survey, they can tell us what information they would like to appear in a pop-up when their point is clicked. And this allows them to explore the sites that are located in their neighborhood as well as in the greater Chicagoland area. However, because of privacy issues, we have restricted it so that as you zoom in, the points will disappear. So we're not sharing your home address. Also on our results page, you can see a summary of our results from our last 2 years of data collection. In 2019, we had 73 monitors who found just over 5,000 eggs. And last year, we more than doubled our number of participants and they found just over 6,000 eggs. We also have interactive graphs that people can use to click on. They can click on the layer name on the right-hand side in the legend to turn on or off layers so they can get a closer view of when and how many eggs or the different stages of caterpillars were observed. Finally, on our results page, there's also a summary of what we've learned so far about what makes a successful patch. We believe that it's not a single characteristic that makes a successful patch, but is likely a combination of factors. And to do this analysis, we looked at patches where we had at least 4 weeks of data, and we compared patches that were not as successful because no eggs or caterpillars were seen, with patches that were more successful, where 50 or more eggs were seen or where late stage caterpillars were seen. And in general, we found that the more successful patches tended to have a larger number of milkweed plants, often were composed of more than one milkweed species, generally had a larger number of blooming plant types, and also tended to be over a year old. They also tended to be larger in size. However, I do want to emphasize that milkweed patches of all shapes and sizes are important. One of our monitors from 2019 saw a monarch all the way from caterpillar to chrysalis to adulthood on her single pot of milkweed. And to see more photos like this, you can scroll all the way down on our results page and click on one of the images shown here to open up a Google photo album of all of the photos that were submitted from last year's participants. As part of the online surveys, people can submit their stories as well as their photos under a Creative Commons non-commercial license that allows us to share their stories with the other participants. And that's one of the best parts of this project, is seeing what people are observing and learning throughout the summer. With Esri's ArcGIS Hub and Survey123 platforms, we can effectively communicate and collaborate with our participants and engage them throughout the summer, making the project easy and enjoyable for both us and them. If you're interested to learn more, I encourage you to visit our website at bit.ly/monarchmonitors. And as I said, the training sessions start next week if you are in the Chicagoland area. Thank you. And again, my name is Karen Klinger, and you can email me if you have any questions at kklinger@fieldmuseum.org.
Thank you, Karen. That is wonderful. I know that there's going to be some comments and questions for Karen. What we're going to do is move to the next panelist, and then we will open up the floor for conversation. And so, Tim, if you want to share your screen while I give you introductions. And again, Karen, I have questions about my milkweed plants. But next, our next panelist is Tim Briggs, and he is a science communication specialist at the New Hampshire Sea Grant. I'm interested in hearing his perspective here because he's a communication professional. He uses writing, photography, and film to help share research, education, and extension projects with the public. His work with the Sea Grant and beyond highlights the marine conservation challenges and successes, groundbreaking researchers, and students who are starting their journeys in science. Welcome, Tim. You are still muted.
Wouldn't let me unmute unless I stopped my presentation. There we go.
Oh, that's crazy.
That's a new one. Thank you for having me. I'd like to thank Esri for inviting me to talk today, and to CitSciVirtual and the CSA for having me. As Charmel said, I'm Tim Briggs. I work at New Hampshire Sea Grant. Sea Grant, for those who aren't familiar, is a national network of 34 university-based programs supporting coastal communities through research, extension, and education. And so my job is, as she said, to create stories about our research and the people who make it happen with the world. And I'm here today to talk to you about one story I made using Esri ArcGIS story maps. But I think first it's important to talk about why we tell science stories. And I may be biased because that's my job, but I think telling stories is one of the best ways we have to connect people to our work and to promote understanding of science. Stories can inspire the next generation of scientists and show them that they can be a scientist too. Stories can change minds, change policies, drive funding. Stories can take many forms, and there are ways to shape a lot of our existing science into stories, academic papers, things like that, and many of them are. But a lot of science is locked away from the tools that could be showing how great science is through great stories, which is crazy, right? We have a real embarrassment of riches of stories these days. You know, we have a billion podcasts, you know, so many TV shows, movies, books, and articles all at our fingertips all the time. There's a lot of competition and there's a lot of good stuff. And these stories are rich with compelling characters and huge emotional stakes and stunning visuals. And the good news is we have that in science. We can make all of these things true. If it were impossible, I would either be paid more or not have a job. And I think it's not that hard, and we can walk through how a story works and think about how that might work for citizen science. So a good story has a couple things. It's pretty simple. We've got characters. We need people to care about. We need people that have that live in a place, and that grounds our story. They need to have motivation, or they need to have strong emotions or emotions we can relate to. And there needs to be a challenge or a conflict that they can overcome, and then you have a resolution. And so this is all very abstract, and I can talk about that, but it's helpful to think about a story that maybe most of us know. So obviously the example is Shrek. So Shrek has characters. We have Shrek and Donkey. They live in a swamp, or Shrek does. They all live in the kingdom. The kingdom brings, or Shrek loves his swamp. He likes his solitude. He likes being alone there. The kingdom initiates a conflict where Donkey is brought to the swamp, and Shrek is angry about that. So he quests to change that. That is the conflict. And the resolution at the end, with many other side stories, because Shrek is a surprisingly complex narrative, is that Shrek learns to accept others in his swamp. So that's, a drilled down version. And citizen science has a lot of these things. Maybe not donkeys, but good citizen science has characters. You have volunteers and researchers, and they are in a natural setting, a local natural area, in nature, in their town, in their waterways, something like that. And because they live there and because they're doing this project, they care. Volunteers are giving up their time for free. And I know researchers don't forget that easily. And what that means is that they have good reasons to be participating in this project, and this project is probably important to them, or whatever the project is working on is important to them. So we can ask them what those reasons are, and their answer is probably a good story. It's a story about, oh, I've been coming here my entire life, or I've lived here my entire life, or I have a deep appreciation for nature. Those are all great threads you can pull at and pull a story out of it. Then you have the challenge or the conflict, which is maybe doing the science or problem solving, or it could be this place that I love is going away and I want to do something about it. And the resolution can be the results from your project, could be what you learn, could be what they learn about their local environment, or it can be a report or something like that. And those results will probably matter to the people because they're giving up this time to get those results. So you have a lot of emotional investment throughout citizen science stories that makes them really good to tell. So I want to walk you through one of my stories now. This is the story I designed using Esri story maps. And I tried to take advantage of all of these parts to weave together a story about climate change, volunteers, and coastlines that were at risk and are at risk of erosion and extinction. So these are my characters. These are my volunteers. They're doing a beach profile, which means they're measuring the slope and the curve of the beach down to the ocean. So this is the setting, the beach, the coast. This is Hampton Beach in New Hampshire, which is where I live, or near where I live. And these volunteers come out once a month to measure the beach. They measure how it changes after storms, or maybe in the summer when there's a little bit of accretion of sand, or either way at any time of year. And that gives researchers a long-term view of how the sand moves, because normally a researcher might only be able to get out there to maybe one beach once a month. But this way they can track all of our coastline. And New Hampshire does not have a huge coastline, but it's 12 sites. It's a lot of sites. And researchers just don't have time for that. And it's a simple process. They use these two poles you're seeing here, and there's a rope between them, and they use that to measure the up and down difference, and they measure it with the horizon. And so it's an easy process that can be taught easily to volunteers. And so there were a few challenges to telling this story. One of them is scale. How do you think about a beach? How do you think about a coastline? How do you think about an ecosystem? How do you get someone else to think about that? Another was time, and another was COVID. So the time thing is, these are long-term processes. It's geography, it's change. And COVID, this is my only field day. These photos you're seeing. I'm a photographer, I'm a visual person. It's hard when you can't get out to do any of those things. And so it was pretty challenging to do that. And story maps allowed me to overcome all three of those. So the first thing that it did is it allowed me to diversify the visuals of the story. I could integrate maps fluidly and easily. I, before this, had zero GIS experience, none. I do have a lot of web design and visual storytelling experience, but I'm not a cartographer. I'm not a data viz person. I would love to be, but I'm not. And this story needed these visualizations. It's like a 3,000, 4,000 word story. It's kind of a tome, but when you read it, it doesn't quite feel like it because it's broken up with all these different elements that Story Maps allows you to include. And so it's kind of a different experience because it's not just a chunk of text. So the maps were a great stepping stone to also solve the scale problem. Beaches are small. Maybe they feel big, but geographically they're not that big. But the erosion that occurs on one beach at maybe the southern tip of our coastline in New Hampshire is also probably occurring in a similar way at our northern beaches, or maybe up in Maine. It's a whole coastline that is experiencing this thing. And so the erosion that's there is symptomatic of a larger problem, which is sea level rise or increased storm intensity. So here in 2018, I focused on in 2018, a series of nor'easters, which are strong storms that hit the Northeast US with some regularity. But this was abnormal, where we had 3 really strong ones back to back to back within 2 weeks of each other. And Story Maps made it easy for people to go from looking at the photos of the beach to the map of the region to now a satellite image, which is, map adjacent. But now you're thinking about it on a bigger scale. And so then I could walk back down and walk through exactly what a story means for an individual beach. And then people are already thinking about that on a regional level. So more intense storms and sea level rise probably means storm surge. And I was able to source images from locals and colleagues and volunteers. And they had these images because they're good characters. They live in this environment. That's why they're in this. They know what's happening, and that makes them both critical for the science and great for a story. So then I could get a little fancier, work in this time-lapse video, which I wish I could show you here because it's really cool. But it's waters rising around these houses. And this is actually one of our worst sunny day flooding spots as well, but this was during a storm. And that kind of hits home with the big results of these storms: widespread flooding and erosion. You can see that graph on the left there is of a before and after of one of the beaches. That's up in Maine. And that green line was a dune, and that dune is now gone. And the data that was taken before and after these storms and throughout this whole program is now being used to help local towns plan for beach management and climate impacts, because these beaches change a lot before and after. And these beaches can be the town's livelihood. There's a lot of tax income that comes from parking or something like that. It's a big attraction for people. And if that goes away, that's big for the town. So backing up, zooming out, as a journalist, being able to seamlessly integrate all of these different types of media into one package with little to no experience in this program is kind of crazy. It may seem like a lot of these projects kind of just are seamless, as I said, but almost all of them used to require a lot more work. About 10 years ago, the New York Times did a really pioneering media-rich story called Snowfall, which is about an avalanche disaster. It's pretty famous in journalism. It won a Pulitzer in 2013. And I read through it recently while I was writing this talk. And I found it took a team of graphics people, design people, 11 of them. It took 11 of them 6 months to put it together. I put this together by myself with editing help from a couple other people, mostly on text, in a month or two. It's just so much easier. And it's ridiculous that you can do that now. And I was able to then launch into a whole nother story structure and use a lot of the tools in the same way. So the broader structure of the story was based around the states that have beach profiling programs. So New Hampshire, where I live, then Maine, just to our north, and then California also has a sister program that's a little younger and a little different. So the first two were tied together by the storms that hit both of our coastlines, Maine and New Hampshire, and showed the importance of beach profiling and set up some stakes. And then the second story kind of flipped the script, because the California story was actually not a story of erosion, but it was a story about what this citizen science project can show us that maybe we didn't even expect. So the Thomas Fire was a really large fire during a really large fire season. 2017, 2018 winter, or 2017 summer into the fall and into the winter were really, really bad for fires. We've had worse since then, unfortunately. But it was followed by an incredible rainfall event that led to this crazy debris flow. So the beach profiling teams actually saw the debris that had washed down the mountains onto their beaches, and they saw this huge increase in sediment and debris, tires, trees, all that kind of thing, rather than a disappearance of sand. So this fire and this debris flow, and then the nor'easter and the erosion are both really large scale events, but their stories were both told with personal narrative. So we had the people, the characters on the beach at the beginning, and then we have another team here. And their personal stories of watching global change happen in their neighborhoods and finding out what that means for them in the future. And so I could amplify or improve those stories and augment them with responsive graphs. I built these with Data Wrapper, which integrated nicely with this. Maps from Esri and story maps, videos, scrolling displays, all this stuff. And so I could build little ecosystems for each part of the written story to live and breathe in. And the immersion and all of these little supplements of rich media made the story so much more digestible. And I think makes it so that you can feel the impacts of what I was saying a lot more, because it grounds it in something visual and something real. One of my favorite things about doing these story maps is that it doesn't matter what your website can do. Our Sea Grant site doesn't have quarter the capability of these tools, but we can make these things that we want to make in story maps and share it from there. And story maps is adding new stuff every day. I got a new email today about the new version that has new tools, and I was excited. So my story got picked up by NOAA and climate.gov after it launched, and they were able to host it in their way because it wasn't our piece, but it was ours. And I guess Esri saw it too, because now I'm here. And that really overachieved our general news stories. We usually get like a couple hundred views on our news stories, and this was in the thousands, which was huge for us. It was definitely a larger effort, but it really paid off in that increased reach. And I think that's due to the richness story maps allowed us to achieve. We reached thousands of people with this story, as I said, that otherwise may have never heard of us or the Citizen Science Project. And we've even had a great response of people asking to join the teams in various states, even though that's not really why we did it. This was more of an appreciation piece, a showing what we're doing, but people still want to join because they see it's a good story, then citizen science is cool. So I was really lucky to be able to tell this story. And the bottom line is that citizen science stories are great stories. And you can use data and visuals and story maps to make them shine. And I hope that my story helps you, at the very least, think about ways that your citizen science project could be told as a story, and helps you explore how story maps might be a good way to do that. So I just thank you to Esri for letting me share my story, the story of my story. And thanks to CSA and CitSciVirtual 2021 for having me. And that's a link down there. I'll put it in the chat after.
Great.
That's my contact info. But yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate that. And please put your contact information in the chat, and then also back at CSA Connect, if you don't mind. I think you're going to have people reaching out after this presentation on how to get involved. And so same with Karen, and now with Abigail. So we have a lot of great projects, and I appreciate your time, Tim. And we will be looking at more of this after we listen to Abigail. She'll be wrapping up our panelist, and I'm just pleased to introduce Abigail. And Abigail, you can share your screen when you have a chance. There you go. Abigail is a Geographic Information Systems Fellow for the National Audubon Society. She has a BS in Environmental and Ecological Science with a BA in Outdoor Adventure Education. What a great combination. So as an avid outdoors enthusiast, Abigail is driven to improve equitable access in all senses of the word. And you're going to hear that today as she describes the story map created for this exciting project. Welcome, Abigail.
Thanks, Sharmel. As she said, my name is Abigail Crump. My pronouns are she, her, and we're going to be talking about birdability, which is a map-powered movement. We're going to start off with what is birdability, since it doesn't really sound like a word. So the origin story of birdability starts in the 2019 National Audubon Convention, even before I arrived at Audubon. The Audubon GIS team was attending this conference when they heard Virginia Rose speak of the obstacles she faced birding as a wheelchair user. The Audubon GIS team was immediately inspired and started scribbling down on napkins, which you can see here, on ideas on how to use story maps, maps, data, and GIS to resolve a lot of these obstacles that Virginia was facing. So they threw this idea at Virginia. She absolutely loved it. And it was with the goal of identifying accessible birding locations across the nation. Fast forward a little bit, and the first batch of birdability was presented in February 2020. So this is the first round of birdability sites. So we're going to talk about where is the platform today. This is where my part of the story comes in. I started helping rebuild birdability into a more robust tool. So this is a story map, still featuring Virginia because she's the creator. And then as the user scrolls down, they're introduced to birdability, the logo. This was really important to our team because we wanted to provide a sense of authority as well as a sense of community behind birdability. Then as the user moves on, they're introduced to what is accessibility. We don't expect our users necessarily to come in understanding what accessibility challenges are. So we go through and explain that accessibility challenges can be mobility challenges, blindness or low vision, deaf or hard of hearing, developmental disabilities, or other health concerns. So it's a very wide range. And then we talk about what does that look like in the outdoors and why does that change how people with accessibility challenges interact with the outdoors. Next up is to teach our users on the broad spectrum of technology background that they may have on how to use this tool. So we break it down into simple steps. Step 1, get outside. Step 2, submit a birdability review. Step 3, use the map, and then repeat those steps over and over. So I'm actually going to walk you through today on how to submit a birdability site review. So we're going to click this big yellow button here. And you heard Karen mention the Survey 123, and that's what this is powered by as well. The way I like to describe Survey 123 is it's a Google form or Survey Monkey, but geo-enabled. So it has geographic information pre-baked into it and pre-baked into the data. So it saves you a lot of steps. So our first question to our users is, what's the name? And we ask them to provide a link. And this is where we ask them to provide that geo information. So this is a map that you can include within your Survey 123. And the users can interact in a few different ways. They can either type in the location's name or they can click current location. So it's going to take me to wherever I am now. And you can change that by simply clicking elsewhere on the map. So you can see that this map is only accepting point data, but there are maps that you can include that accept line data and polygon data. So whatever fits your project best. Scroll down a little bit more, and this is where you get to the meat and potatoes of the survey. This is our checklist. We want people to just use their skills of observation because, again, we're not expecting them to have this ADA compliance or accessibility background. So use your skill of observation to just identify whether your site or location has these accessibility features. So you scroll all the way through this. It has pictures to help people understand what we're looking for, especially Braille on trails, which is very helpful for long cane users. Other images, and you scroll all the way down. You can also submit other information as well as a rating and your own photos. So if you're unsure as to whether something's accessible, you can submit the photo as well as alternative text. So we ask for every photo that our users submit, they submit accessibility alternative text as well. And this allows people with screen readers to understand and digest the images through intense or in-depth descriptions. So once you're all done with that, you're going to click submit, and we're going to pretend we clicked submit, and it'll take us back to the application. So I think this is one of the coolest parts of this application is that the feedback is immediate. You go from the Survey 123, and when you submit that survey, it immediately populates the map with your data. I believe that increases engagement for our community because they see that their information, their data isn't going into some data abyss, but is going directly into the tool itself. So it's a story that they're getting to interact with and be a part of. So we're going to show you how to use this map real quick. So the user can zoom in on these little trailheads, little diamond trailheads. Being a Kansas City native, I'm going to just go to Kansas City, give them a shout out. I'll click on one of the diamonds. When you do that, you come up with what's called a pop-up, and it tells you all of that information that was just recorded in the survey in a very easily digestible table. So all of that information is right here. Now those users with accessibility challenges can read this information and decide for themselves, even before they get in the car or head to the trail, that whether or not it's something they can manage and whether it's accessible to them. So once our users interact with the map, they can also engage with the community, either by contacting us or visiting the Birdability website. So that's the platform as it stands today. And there's a lot of content, as you can see in that story map. There's a lot of different tools working inside it. There is one tool that you don't see within that story map, and that is our Birdability Survey Reviewer. The reason I want to point this out is because it's a tool that you can use for your community science and for your volunteers that want to be more engaged. They want to be working with the data. So I'll give you an example. We have an occupational therapist who consults us on these surveys, since again, we are not experts in ADA or accessibility. So this application allows her to go in and edit the data and edit the data for accessibility information without ever having to work with an Excel spreadsheet or ArcGIS Online or any GIS knowledge. It's a very user-friendly interface. So for example, she can click on one of these new sites. It'll take her to there on the map, and then she can just go into the survey as if she's submitting the survey herself and make the edits that are required. So something that you could use for your projects as well. So again, within that story map of Birdability, you saw images, words, instructions, survey 123, web map, links, and it's all wrapped inside a story map. The reason we chose story map as the platform for Birdability is because unlike other websites where the user could navigate to different menus and different dropdowns, there's one flow in story maps. It's down, you scroll down. So it facilitates that experience for our users. They're guided to what is accessibility and what does that look like in the outdoors, how to use the app, submit the survey, use the map, and then ask questions, which is exactly the kind of experience we want our users to have. So I'm going to talk a little bit about story maps at Audubon as a whole. These are some graphs of story maps at Audubon over the last 2 years. So you can see the one on the left is the number of view counts over the last 2 years, while the other one is the count of Audubon story maps created. Tim mentioned how low the barrier of entry is, and that's why our users and our members at Audubon are creating more and more story maps, because they're realizing how simple it is and how little background knowledge in terms of technology is required to actually create one of these. To give you some examples, these are the top 6 story maps at Audubon based on view counts besides Birdability, and they all have a community science background. For example, number 2 here is let's celebrate the 120th Christmas bird count. Christmas bird count is one of the world's largest and longest running Christmas or community science projects, and it's being supported with story maps. So finally, I have to do a shameless plug for Birdability. As you're walking your trails or going to your local parks, please submit to Birdability. That information is invaluable to those with accessibility challenges. And then finally, I hope you can explore the tools that you saw today as a way to support your own community science projects. Thank you.
Thanks, Abigail. That was really exciting. I'm going to have to bring Birdability with me when I'm doing the Christmas bird count and have them in each hand. That would be perfect. Wonderful. Let me go ahead and share. Thanks to everybody, again, to all the panelists. I am going to kind of wrap up with a screenshot here. There were a few questions about what we were talking about, and I'm going to just answer those in general and how how it fits in the ecosystem of ArcGIS. So we had great presentation on ArcGIS Hub and ArcGIS Story Maps. Those are both applications that you have access to if you have an ArcGIS Online organization account. One thing that I don't have on here, the slide, is Survey 123, which two of you guys mentioned. And so ArcGIS Survey 123 is also a part of the ArcGIS Online subscription for an organization account. Now, if you have any more technical questions, you can email me and I'll put my link in there. But I really want to get back to the panelists and answer those questions and let them talk to us about communication and collaboration. And Karen, I have a question for you. If you're still there, she's coming back. So, Karen, if everybody else has questions, please start typing them in. This is, you're saying, the third year of doing your project. And so what changes have you made to incorporate participant feedback? And what lessons have you learned, if you don't mind sharing?
That's a great question. And some of the things that I talked about are a result of some of the feedback that we got. So our very first year, we actually just had one very long survey that had both the site information as well as the weekly monitoring data. So people were having to enter in all of this information every single time, because at that time we weren't using Hub. And so we didn't have a way to keep track of who was entering what data. So to see that you were entering your data every single week, we had used all that information to help keep track of that. So that was our big change with our second year of splitting that one big survey up into multiple surveys. Last year we actually had 3, which was a little too confusing. So now we're back down to 2 surveys. One is the one-time survey for your sites, and then the second is your weekly survey. The third survey was originally for an extra July monitoring, and so now I've just kind of incorporated that right into the second survey. And one of the other main changes is that, well, last year we did have a little bit of automation with, we had one email that was sent to you right after you submitted your site. People also wanted to see what data they had entered. They wanted a record of that. And they also wanted those reminders to be recording their data every week. So this year I've added another email that is automatically sent to you when you submit your weekly survey. So that gives you like, okay, I just entered this data. Here's my link for next week's data. And again, it'll update with the information. So if you did plant more milkweed or had more plants, those numbers will update through as you use those new customized links that you're sent. And those customized links, for another benefit, is that it does fill in some of that information. So you're not having to remember what was the name of my patch, and do I have to say every time that I have 3 milkweed species and these are my 3 species and these are my plants. Because we do use that information, we are keeping track of what's found on what species, because that's another very interesting thing to us, is what are the best species to help support the monarchs. And do you need a lot of plants? So these are all plugged into our analysis, and we want to make it easier on people who are collecting the data, that they don't have to enter in so much.
Wow. That's a lot. Yeah, everyone learns, and that's what I wanted everybody to share. Kind of what have you learned going through this project? You've been the longest, as far as 3 years. I think I'm going to move over to Tim now and say, what were the challenges that you encountered, and are you going to be doing story maps in the future since they were kind of successful for you?
Yeah, we're definitely doing it in the future. I'm working on a new one right now about sea run fish projects in New England Sea Grant. So that's fish that live in both the ocean and freshwater in part of their lives. So I'm working on that at the moment. Not quite in the building it stage, but I'm in the reporting stage. So I'm excited for that. Yeah, a lot of the challenges, I talked about a few in my presentation, which were mostly existential challenges. Like, I don't know if you guys know, there was a pandemic that happened. That was a big challenge. And being able to, include a lot of non-in-person things in there made it a lot easier. I had a lot of Zoom interviews, which are fun. But yeah, I mean, I didn't exactly have challenges with story maps, and some of the things maybe I wanted to include that didn't exist, like custom colors and stuff like that, are now all super easy to do and exist in the And they existed to some extent before, but now they're very much part of it. So yeah.
Thanks. I love, yeah, it's great to hear from everybody's different experiences and experiences with the ArcGIS, because I think a lot of people who are listening today and join this session are new to it, and in fact, and think maybe, oh, I'm not a GIS person, it's not for me. So that really speaks a lot to that aspect. And so, thank you, Tim. And he has a lot of great information and great pictures too. That's his other, he's a photographer, he said. So put a plug for you for that. And Abigail, what about the birdability? I mean, it sounds like it went from a story map to now it's an official nonprofit.
It is. It is now its own nonprofit that's still being supported by Audubon and by the Audubon GIS team, because they don't have those capabilities quite yet. But it is, since its relaunch in October of 2020, it started with 220 site reviews, and it is now up to 620 site reviews. So that's pretty incredible information-wise. And now we have meetings with different park organizations and different states and counties to have them go in and map all of their own parks and trails so that they can identify what trails need support in terms of accessibility.
I like that. It's kind of like the Waze mentality. The Waze started, and then they started to let states and add in their own construction projects. So and put timing in there, so you can have the communities that already know and if they have that information, but we can also kind of keep it up to date, because we know how it is. It's budgets are tight. So we're getting some questions in. So I'm just going to ask them, and any of the panelists can answer. The first question I have here is, what are your titles as they relate to your project? Who uses, creates workflows or presentations using these tools at your organizations? It's a tough question. Cameron, you can unmute and ask your question. Uh, so make sure I
Yeah,
can.
Abigail mentions the GIS team, for example. So, I'm sure some folks have that sort of like direct title as their job, but others, this tool, one of the benefits seems like you don't have to have the depth of knowledge because of the ease of use. There might be folks who are researchers themselves who are also sort of like wearing the hat of building their stories. So I was just interested in what each of your roles are within your organization or as it relates to your project, and if you built your story map and also are in the field, or are a lead researcher, or are behind the scenes.
That's a good question. And I'll answer for one thing. It's, I find that a story map's made up of a team. You sometimes have the scientist adding their point. You might have a person who can create a map, and you might have a person who's good at editing or taking pictures. So that's what I have found, but I would like to hear any of the panelists respond.
I can field that one first. So honestly, at Audubon, we have over 1,000 ArcGIS Online members. So a lot of different people are making these ArcGIS Online story maps. To give you an example, yes, we do have the GIS team, but we are a science organization, and a lot of our scientists are also making story maps to present their data and information. Not to mention, I have a meeting next week with our entire comms team to help them understand how they can use story maps as just a communications tool at Audubon. So yeah, wide range.
I would say in our organization, we have a similar diversity. We're just a little smaller. So we're part of UNH. And so UNH has, within the cooperative extension program, which is kind of a sister program more oriented towards farming necessarily, and like land use. They have some GIS people that will assist some of our researchers on similar story maps. So one of our other story maps that performed really well that I unfortunately did not have a hand in was a local seafood finder during like early COVID. So a lot of people, restaurants and markets were closed, and both fishermen could not sell their their catch to markets, and also people couldn't find a way to buy it. So that was led by one of our researchers and was a partner with the GIS team in cooperative extension, I believe, that brought that together. They're also married, those two people, so that helped that facilitation happen. But we also have some other people that use it. So I obviously am a communications person. My title was science communication specialist, and I came to it from a communications standpoint, but we definitely have other people that use it for data sharing, for the application I just described, and hopefully more people using it as stories in the way that I did as well.
And I'll say that even though I'm part of the Field Museum, which you think is a giant organization, which it is, I'm actually part of a smaller department. Like I said, it's called the Keller Science Action Center. So within our group, there's only actually like 3 GIS specialists. And so me and my colleagues kind of do a lot of the GIS lifting, but we also are available to help people with other projects as well. But yeah, we do our work we're focused our work both in the Chicago area, and we also do work in South America. And so yeah, we do a lot of cool things, but the bulk of the GIS is on us QGIS people. But for the Monarch Community Science Project, I co-lead with one of the other people who does do some GIS, but she's also a conservation ecologist. So she actually had a lot more of the Monarch background, and I do a lot more of the technical, the hub site creation, the survey creation lifting. So, but we find ways to collaborate. We're very, very collaborative group.
Thank you all. I have to say that there was, we're doing another session on Tuesday the 18th on location-based analysis. And I found another story map done by graduate students at the University of Colorado. And none of them knew GIS. And they did an analytical project for a class. And then they made a story map. So I was like, wow. So he's going to be part of, I couldn't fit too many people on the panel here. So he's going to be part of the analysis session, but they created it. I found him from creating a story map. So it is pretty interesting to see the diversity of people. My next question for the panelists, or not my next question, the next question listed here, is it possible to enter data that becomes mapped by color? Probably more for the GIS. For example, if you are looking at pollutants and if the citizen scientists are gathering the data using the survey 123, will it show up the map as a different colors depending upon the concentration of the pollutant entered? And what's the level of resolution of the maps?
I can start with that one. For the symbology of the points, yes, absolutely. You can decide how to set those points. If depending on your data field, you can decide the different levels and create the legend yourself. It could be different colors, different shapes, whatever you want it to be. So tons of flexibility there. And then for map scale, it keeps going past, yes, street level and beyond. So. Not quite down to the soil level, but I'm sure Esri will get there.
Karen, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I will say we just do Survey 123 on the website, but there is an app that you can also use. That's Survey 123. That's a little more friendly for the phones. We don't do it just because that's like an extra thing to learn. But there's also other field apps that are available, like field maps, and there's other ones that are designed for simple data collection as well. But yeah, we could customize, like I said, with the map of our sites, I've customized it to limit like how far you can zoom in, what pops up when you click on a point. So there's a lot of customization that you can do with those maps.
And so, yes, to get to to answer the question about which level, so the ArcGIS base maps that come in there, the street maps and imagery is based on what we can purchase and provide, and it goes to different resolutions and scales. A lot of it is provided actually from communities. Cities and states provide imagery, and we bring it in and host it, and have access to it. I know some communities are even getting drone or LiDAR data, which is really high resolution that you can get down to the details. So it all kind of depends upon where you are in the world and what's available to be purchased and then added in there for you to use for free. And as Karen said, sometimes you need to limit the resolution. So Karen in her office probably can go to the fine detail of your household level, but she's promised the volunteers and the people the participating that the public version will not be able to scroll and zoom into that level. And so that's the flexibility that you can have, because as a scientist, we want to know where the point is to do the study and the analysis, but you got to be careful on the data that you share publicly, as visually and otherwise. So yes, having that flexibility. And Karen did answer really the next question: how is it to use on a mobile app? So the maps that they saw, the apps that we see, the story maps and such, work on mobile devices. They're uh, what's the term? But anyway, they're mobile
Responsive.
responsive. Thank you. I was like, observant. No, that's not it. It's responsive. So yeah, they're mobile responsive. So you if you can open up the web applications. In fact, you guys, all of y'all, add in your links in here, and people can open them up and see how they work on the phone. And the survey 123, you can give people an ability to say, hey, do you want to open it on your phone? Then you have to download this native app, Survey 123, or do you want to keep it in the web browser? And I have to say, Karen, I see so many people just keeping it in the web browser, and that was the biggest surprise when they started allowing that to be just in their web browser. So it's interesting. Okay. Okay, if you have questions again about Hub, oh, they're coming up too quick. They're passing up. Let's see. Okay, here's one. For efforts that don't have access to ArcGIS online organization account, how affordable is it to use?
There is, I would say there is a free version of Hub. I believe.
ArcGIS Online, there's a personal account.
Yeah.
But you really need the organizational account to do anything worthwhile. So,
Yeah.
so it's good to start with that. There is nonprofit licensing, educational licensing. I mean, if you're at a university, odds are your university somewhere, probably the GIS department has a license, and it was just and then most of the time it's an enterprise site license. So I don't know exactly where you are. For the folks, I know we have a lot of people, and I'm happy to have them from other countries. We have international distributors that will give you pricing for your set. So I'm primarily speaking about the US base, because that's what I know. But nonprofit licensing exists, and educational licensing exists.
Yeah, sorry. That's correct. I was just saying with Hub, there is 2 versions, and we're using the kind of the more advanced paid, like extra version. So there is a free one, but that might only be for organizations. So my bad. But that doesn't have one of the main differences, it doesn't have the community accounts, which is in the more advanced version. But because we were considered as a field museum part of an educational institution, we were allotted the ability to use this advanced Hub. So like you said, there are a lot of possibilities with, and a lot of times it's just reaching out, like we just reached out to our Esri representative, and we're able to set that up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, happy to connect you guys to somebody, even at the international representatives there. I mean, our website probably has links to them. Lorraine might be able to add some links in here for, she's a colleague of mine also on the call. Thank y'all for adding your links in here. I see Karen, Tim's, the birdability story maps. That's great. All right. Well, did I miss a question, panelists? I'm kind of going through. Anything that you want to add based on the questions we've seen so far?
I do want to make a note about story maps and just the overall flexibility. In case y'all didn't notice, I actually presented the story map within a story map, and that's really just to hone in on the idea that you can throw anything in a story map. Everything can be embedded in a story map to make it whatever you need it to be for your product. So just really think outside the boundaries when it comes to building it and what you can include.
Thank you. Tim, I want to come back to you with your communication background and your hat on. If I have a citizen science project and I want, to tell my story, how do I find these characters and these sources? What did, where do you go? And do you have to get permissions from those citizens to put their
I
story?
definitely get permission. Definitely. I mean, depends what your goal is. If you're trying to like take down a corporation or something, like, I don't know, that's not really my field. But I found my sources mostly through going through our researchers. So the story came to me as like, hey, we have this great citizen science program. We'd love to do a story about it. We'd love to share this. Like, we've got it in 3 states. It could be really cool. And so my first step was like, okay, I want to talk to the researcher in every state, but also the volunteer manager in every state, because the volunteer manager knows all the people. They know who's the most involved, who's been there for a long time. And so you can kind of go down the list of like things you might think might make someone interesting, like who's a new member, who's doing something a little different. So in California, the people we talked to, they're a family that have been doing it for a couple of years, and they started building an app that helps them enter data. And now I'm thinking maybe they just should have used GIS, but guess they didn't know about that. So going kind of down the hierarchy of people is a great way to find people. And now hopefully, if you can be in person, going out to meet people, and sometimes you go out and meet a team and you expect like person A is going to be interesting, and it's actually person D who you didn't know was going to be there, who has a great story that you didn't realize. So ask a lot of questions and be open to stories, and trust the people who are in the project, because they probably know who's got something cool going on.
That's awesome. There is an example of a hub site, Feds Feed Families, and they actually have a place in that hub site where volunteers, it's for federal employees to support food banks and the whole process of United Against Hunger. But there's a survey that all the volunteers could actually fill out to submit their story, and then you add it to the map and a picture. I mean, it's actually not as beautiful as a story map, but you can probably then take that information and compile it. So especially if you have so many volunteers, you can't get to every meeting. I mean, maybe you can't get to all those states that you covered. So maybe people can submit their own, and then you have a basis to call them up. Who knows? So I'll put that link for Feds Feed Families in there, because I love that little Karen's going, yes, she must have seen that hub site before. And Jennifer is going crazy here, adding all of these links. And are these posters that have done story maps? Wow, pretty neat.
That hub site sounds like a smart communications person who's automating their workflow. I like that. It also sounds like something that might work better for something like birdability that's on a national level, where you may not be able to like have a volunteer manager that knows someone. Like there's different levels of community science, right? So like our beach profiling team is like a couple dozen people maybe, so we can go down a list of those and know them. But birdability is national, right? So it's hundreds of sites. So that's a very different way to find stories. So that would be a better way of what I described, which is very narrowly focused.
But then the key is to bring it down to the local level, because that's where you get the volunteers and where you get the inspiring stories. But it is you have to have different tools depending upon the scale of your project. So you're right, Tim. So Jennifer, those are posters using story maps that she put in there. That's pretty nice. I'm going to open up if other folks want to ask a question. If you didn't have time to type it down, go ahead and unmute yourself. I believe you have the capability. And I'm looking for the Feeds Family link. And I just presented it today earlier, so I have it. And I also am looking at what other things did I want to give you guys? There's something else. I'll think about it. Karen, Abigail, anything else to add in? Oh, I know what I was going to look for. I wrote a blog about the different sessions at the CitSciVirtual, and there was another session that went on, and I think they're doing it a couple times. I think they already did it once yesterday, so I'm looking for that. So give me the chance to find that one.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say, so I attended the virtual, Esri has a user conference, and last year it was virtual, and it's like a great opportunity to learn more about all the different applications. And so last year I learned about a relatively new application called Experience Builder. And so now I went to the conference a few years ago and learned about Hub, and last year I learned about Experience Builder. So there's always, and I'm like, oh, that got the wheels turning of like how I could potentially use that, because we're very much interested in participatory mapping and getting people involved in mapping and how to share information. So there's always, with ArcGIS Online, there is so many different apps depending on what you are trying to create. So sometimes, yeah, it's just a question of what is the most appropriate way to share your information, tell your story.
Yes, I think starting with ArcGIS story maps and our ArcGIS Hub is a good way, especially this communication collaboration, and the others may evolve if you have time and the bandwidth, because we know some organizations or studies are a couple of people. That's why I like this group of two of panelists, because you kind of all have different size organizations, Audubon, and others. So
Also mentioned, Karen brought up the different languages that you can bring in with Hub and story maps and whatever it may be. And that's, in terms of accessibility, that's one form of accessibility, is making sure that your community science tools can actually reach the entire community, not just some of the members. So languages is one, and then also, I briefly mentioned alternative text for images, making sure that your tools are accessible to those with whatever accessibility challenge it may be. So, accessibility goes beyond just birdability, but making sure your technology is also accessible.
That was something we were really concerned about with this project, where if I wanted to have created something of this like depth and complexity on our internal site, which I said would have been really difficult, making that possible and then also ADA compliant would have been a nightmare. So it was really great when, we had that question early in the process, like, is this something that's going to work for us? Is this something that's going to be accessible? Can we make this work in all of these different ways? And the answers just kept being like, yes, you can do that. We've thought of this. It's like, oh, thank you.
Yeah, now there's tons of documentation, Esri documentation, at least based on all of their applications of the, accessibility rating of the different tools and different features within their tools. So that you can always know as a creator whether or not something's actually going to work for someone with an accessibility challenge.
Yeah, that was also really important to us, and having the documentation for Hub was really helpful, especially, working with our website team and making sure that everything we could do to make it accessible was available. So yeah, we really appreciate that.
I like that y'all are just going on with the conversation, letting me put some links in here. Please open up your video conversations. This is just to exchange ideas. You got some experts here that can help you, guide you. So there's a couple of other extra sessions going on. There's one Tuesday, May 11th. It's part of Bundle A. It's A5. And then there is the general plenary session on Monday. I need to get that link. And thanks for attending, everybody. If you have to go, I understand. We're different times of the day here, maybe lunchtime, maybe end of happy hour time. I'm not sure. And I really, really want to thank my panelists. They put in a lot of hard work for this, to get these presentations together, accepting all of my emails, asking for information. And and bravo. That's all I get. Bravo. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.
Super.
Yes,
I'm
thank
not
you.
gonna let you go. Yeah, I'm not gonna let you go yet, and I'm still gonna give you a couple seconds for people to unmute themselves. But just before they all left, I wanted to thank you guys. So let's see, what other events? Oh, I wanted to do the how can I find? Jennifer, do you have if you're still there, the link to the
Yeah, I'm here.
plenary session, or is there no
Yeah.
link? No,
Yeah, I can grab that for you. Hang on just a minute.
thanks. She's
Sure.
much more savvy at the, I'm getting good, but, oh, that Tuesday, May 18th. Oh. There's so many sessions. I'm so glad that they're being recorded. Hopefully you enjoy the rest of the month, especially for people who are new to the Citizen Science Association. Thanks for joining the conference, and hopefully you join Citizen Science Association. Jennifer will be happy for me to say that.
Thanks. Yeah.
Of course, Jennifer, the executive director of CSA. And yes, Joseph Karski is going to be presenting on Monday. What time is that Monday now?
It's noon Eastern.
Noon Eastern US. So please join us. He's full of energy and an educator. So coming from the perspective of providing these tools for educators. So we communicating. Now we're going to be educating for teachers to use these in classes. And so it's different tools, but maybe some of them the same tools there too. So I'll put a plug in for Joseph. Karen, are you going to attend the Esri User Conference this year, the virtual one, or Tim or Abigail? If you
Yeah, no, we're grateful. I mean, it's free for us, and we don't have to. I mean, it was enjoyable when I got to go with my colleague to San Diego, for sure.
Right.
That's always really nice. And we only can send 2 people at a time, but last year anybody in our organization could attend, which was really great. But the hard part is setting aside that week to really focus on attending the training sessions. But
right,
it's great that
that's all day, every day. It's not like this scattered throughout a month. So that is harder. What she's referring to about going for free is that if you have a license of ArcGIS,
yes.
then you get a certain number of, and she said 2.
Sorry,
I just like free.
So, but yeah, with the maintenance contract.
With the maintenance contract, you get so many licenses to attend. And so if you have ArcGIS somewhere in your organization, somebody has a license to be able to attend, even internationally, to come to the international conference. But because it was virtual last year, if the organization had a license, anyone from that organization could attend.
But it was great because there's also the networking was a little awkward, but I did reach out to someone because I was having some issues as I had just worked on setting up my hub, and had direct conversation with someone who was like head of hub creation, and then she was the one I think who helped spotlight our project on their website, and like, so there's some really good opportunities there.
Yes. If you have any technical questions, anybody in here who citizen science questions, citizen science projects, surveys, that's a great way of getting answers. And we will, lots of people there. And I'm going to put my email address in here. If you have any questions on that, I could try to get you in contact with the right person. Well, again, I think we're going to wrap up. We have only 9 minutes left, and I appreciate it again for everybody attending, for the few who have hung out with us for the end, and have a good evening or the rest of your day.
Well, thank you all for sharing your stories. Really, this has been fantastic to learn, not just about the tools, but about what can be done with them, how the stories can be told. It's really wonderful to see these resources for citizen science, and I look forward to seeing more folks throughout the community starting to look at what's available.
Exactly. Yeah, I forgot to mention, like Jennifer, last year, 2 years ago when we had the conference in North Carolina, we had a workshop on creating story maps. So it was a pre-conference workshop. So, we didn't have really that kind of environment to do that here, but maybe in Arizona next year. So if there's interest, let us know. Be happy to put that on for attendees if in person next year. Yes.
Cross our fingers. Yeah. We'll definitely be asking. I'm seeing lots of good comments floating around about story maps and mapping and storytelling. So we'll look for ways that we can make that happen for 2022.
Exactly. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye all.